Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a topic that is not in the Lean Startup. And it's not in the Startup Owner's Manual. Neither will you find it quite in 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Okay? A little bit, but not totally. That's corporate culture. And in fact, you're not going to find it in the next step either. Right? It doesn't show up in that flow. It's something that hasn't been added yet. But it is important. And it's important because most entrepreneurs forget about it. Right? They don't think about what culture they want their company to have when it's up and running and mature. They think that's a problem for later on. But it's something you can set ahead of time. It's something you can set when you are 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people and work on it to keep it going in the future. Right? And it's too late. Once you have 20 or 30 or 40 people in there, they set their own culture if you don't set it for them. And the default is what we see at the office and in Dilbert, right? And in the realms of big corporate cubicle society, right? And no one likes that culture, right? Maybe the people on top like it because they get what they want done, but the people working in there, they don't like that culture. It's not good, right? It's not healthy. It's not something we should be replicating. So the question is, what should we do now? Right? What can you set in place now? And I've never seen a really good book on this topic. I've seen a lot of little books. Yeah.
Have you seen Tony Hsieh's culture book that he produces through Zappos?
I've read a book on culture in Zappos, but it didn't answer my questions.
Oh.
I haven't read that one. What this lecture is going to be based on is 3 different sources. One is the Method. 2 is the Netflix Freedom and Responsibility PowerPoint. And 3rd is the Valve, what do they call it? It's the Valve, not owner's manual, employee manual that they hand to all employees. So we'll walk through these 3. All right, so it's based on the book. First one's the Method, right around Method Soap by the 2 founders. And just to be clear, this is Method Soap as in cleaning products, right? Pretty designed cleaning products. And the book's split into 7 sections. It's actually 8 sections. There's a great overview at the beginning, but we're going to talk about the first 4. Right? The book then goes on to talk about how to do retail management and do design and whatnot. We'll skip that today. It's not relevant to the topic. The preface of the book is worth the price of the book. So the preface of the book explains the story of starting up Method Soap from scratch. 2 guys have an idea of making Aveda for home products, cleaning products. Right? So clean, natural products with beautiful designs for home cleaning products, which just wasn't done. And just like every other startup, it's hard. And they walk through how hard it was. Right? And if you want to read that kind of story, there's other good books about that, such as the Honest Tea story, and a bunch of these other stories of these companies that do good in the world. They write good stories about that, but they don't talk, in those other books, they don't talk about corporate culture. So that was the pitch for Method Soap was literally Aveda for the home.
I just have one question around that. Did
Yes.
they follow the model of going through communes or kibbutzim to build them the way Aveda did, or no?
No. So they were looking at Aveda as a go-to brand for healthy personal care products. And they said, why isn't there a brand to do that in the home care products? And one of the reasons is that they have just 5 or 6 competitors. But those competitors are P&G, Unilever, Colgate-Palmolive. They're humongous multinational companies. They are the biggest advertisers in the world with the biggest, best-known brands. And yet they decided to jump into that market. And if you remember many weeks ago when we talked about competition, my typical joke is to say, who wants to go into sugared fizzy water? Right? Who on earth wants to go compete against Coke and Pepsi? Well, these guys decided to compete against P&G and Colgate and Palmolive, right? and all the others. Right? And if you go to the supermarket, you can look at the shelf space of those companies' products versus all the rest. That is the shelf space. Right? There is no space for Method Soap in most stores. 10 years later, here we are now. It's just starting to show up in my stores. Right? It's a very hard market to go in. one of the ways they attack this, one of the ways that they make themselves distinctive is by having a unique corporate culture. And so, first and foremost, in their book that they wrote, they put corporate culture. First thing they wanted to talk about. And the reason is that as you grow past 30 or 40 people, you inevitably add process to your company. There just is no way for 30 or 40 human beings to work together in a place without some process. And we'll see in the Netflix case, they think there's ways around it. We'll see in the Valve case. We'll see other ways of doing the process, but you have to have a process. And culture is kind of a layer on top of that process. So I remember my first job, I don't even put it on the resume, my first job was at IBM. They had a room, just
straight out of college?
yes. They had a room for forms. If you wanted to do something as an employee, you could find the form to ask permission in that room. Just imagine a room that was like the size of the space here that was just filing cabinets. Just filled with 200 copies of every form you wanted. So of course vacation form was in there, sick leave form was in there, but I don't know what else. There were just dozens and dozens and dozens of forms. That was the culture of IBM. Right, was great, you want to do something, fill out a form. Right, go get your manager's approval, sometimes his or her manager's approval, and so forth, to get it done. Yes?
My job interview with IBM, I told a joke, and the HR personnel just sort of looked at me and said, "We don't tell jokes." Yeah. So I totally relate to
Yeah, all right. So here we are, it's 2013. Most people I know would just, shake if I told them, all right, well, here we are at Fledge. If you need to do something, go down to the basement, go into the specific room, we've got a form for it. Right? It's not our culture here. It's not the norms. It's not what people want to do anymore. If you create a great culture, right, the premise here, which I agree with, is if you create a great culture, then the world will know about it. That your workers will tell their friends about it. That will help you get more people. And so, again, in this particular case, which is true of almost every startup. All right, let me try that again. In this particular case, which is true of pretty much every startup, you're competing against the bigger company. Right? In this case, humongous companies. So why would anyone want to join Method Soap and struggle and fight to get a little bit of shelf space to sell a little bit of soap, instead of going and working for P&G and being handed $100 million of budget to go and sell a lot more soap? Right? If soap is your passion, why are you working for Method? Right? So culture is the answer to that. And it becomes even more important as the lines between personal life and business life fade away. Right? We're always on, we're always connected, we've got our email in our pocket, we're expected to take phone calls anywhere for work. Right? Answer emails at any time of the night. Right? That's a culture. Right? That's the normal culture right now. So as that blends around, we should worry about this even more. And given now that we have enough discussion of this topic, right, and we're seeing some of these cultures starting to get talked about, we should emulate the best practices. We should take the parts we like, right, and bring it to our own companies. So how do you do this? Right? It's not obvious how you make a culture. It takes work. It's the same answer as how you make a good marriage. It takes work. Right? It doesn't just happen. So if you do culture really well, then no one notices that you're doing it. Right? What they're saying is it's magic at that point. Okay. They didn't think about this. In the case of Method, they didn't have this lecture, and they weren't thinking about culture when it was just the 2 of them, or 5 of them, or 10 of them. They got to the point where there were, I'm trying to get the number, it was 50 or 60 people in the company. And somehow they had gotten that far without even hiring an HR person. So they stumbled on a culture of, we're not going to do this dodgy HR. We're not going to tell people, oh, your resume has to be in this form and you can't make jokes. Right? And here's how you do this and that. So when it came time, it's very hard to run a company of 50 people and no HR. Right? People have needs. So they said, well, we have a choice. We could either institute an HR department or we could worry about culture. First and foremost, we're going to worry about culture. So they set up what they called the Ministry of Culture. And in the Ministry of Culture, they invited anyone who wanted to come into that meeting. So amongst the employees, bring them in and have them figure out what is the culture of Method. What is it that was there at the beginning that may start to get diluted as they add more people, but which they wanted to make sure kept going as they got to hundreds and 200, multiple hundreds and thousands of employees. Right? And this is what they came up with. These are the 5 core values of Method. Number 1 is keep Method weird, which is a very strange one to start with, but it's important to their culture. 2 is what would MacGyver do? Right? For those of you old enough to remember MacGyver, right? How can you make a solution out of the smallest and simplest parts possible, whatever's on hand, as opposed to engineering something complicated, right? Or engineering it correctly. Right? 3rd is innovate, don't imitate. And the last part of the book talks about this. Their only chance against P&G and Colgate and the other companies is to innovate. They can't come up with a Me Too product. They can't come up with a product that looks anything or acts anything like the P&G product. It has to be unique. It has to be something that stands out. And it's basically the purple cow phenomenon, right? They have to come up with a purple cow, and then they have to come up with the spotted purple cow, and then they have to come up with the fuzzy spotted purple cow, and so forth. Right? Their culture is all about collaboration and caring about customers. Okay? So those are their 5, probably in this order. And to help spread this culture, they did literally spread it around the office. They printed cards. So these are examples of the Keep Method Weird card that are just floating around on people's desks and whatnot. They have posters up on the walls. And I've seen this as I go around to the Fortune 500s. There's often the culture poster on the wall, which is like care.
Integrity.
It's the top. It's the top-down one. It's like, you know, at IBM there's one that most people don't know, which is think. Dates back over 100 years, but that's the motto. Internal culture for the employees is think. Right? At HP, I think it was innovate. Right? When you get to have 10,000 people and you open, you walk in and the elevator's open and it tells you right there on the wall, right? Care. Yeah, that doesn't seem to work that well.
Do you mean for the PowerPoint to be going, like, do you have slides showing? Because
Really, the whole time?
yeah, it was like that the whole time, but I didn't realize you had slides until you said this was an example of the cards.
I thought
There
you
you go.
were being like the consummate professional and the show must go on. I didn't realize you didn't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't look behind me. All right. We will deal. Sorry. Okay. Well, I'm not going to do it from the beginning, so we'll add in the slides later. All right. So there's an example of the method curve. Second, you've heard this over and over again. You need to hire the right people. Right? You need to hire people smarter than you and all that. So the method test is, would I want to sit next to this person on a cross-country flight? Right? That's a thought. This is a documented piece of their culture. Right? So it's all about collaboration and whatnot. And so given this person, is that someone I'd actually want to spend a day with? Right? More or less. Which is interesting. There's another book which did talk about a little teeny bit about culture, is hiring, which is The Art of the Start. And his equivalent of this was way less. It was, if I see this person across the wide hallway at the mall, do I go and bother to talk and say hi to them? Right? And if I don't want to say hi to them, don't hire them. Well, that's a way lower bar than I want to sit next to this person and talk to them all day. Right? Because you can't sit on an airplane and ignore the person next to you. Right? And, you know, is that a high enough bar for you, or do you want to go on higher? Right? Do you want to spend, do you want to be able to spend a week with someone? Right? Is an even higher bar. Method, when they do their hiring, and we can go on and on about the throes of hiring, but they do homework for everyone who wants to work for their company. And the homework has 3 questions in it. One's a strategic question, one's a tactical question. That's nice. The third one's the important one. They ask each and every employee how you would keep Method weird. Right? They are clearly looking for creative people. Excuse me. They're looking for creative people that can keep this culture going, right, in its style, especially around innovation. Okay? I highly recommend, when you think about hiring, to use the homework method. Right? It gets you past the 1 hour of face-to-face interviews to get you further inside the head of people. But, you know, that's a slight corner of the culture.
Is that, do they already have that question, or is that part of the interview process?
They hand them the homework at the end of the interview process. Great, we liked you, now step 2, here's some homework. Gets back to us tomorrow.
Is this book published like in bookstores or just?
Just yet another business book. All right, they do Monday morning huddles. So if you're here at Fledge, you know we do huddles 3 days a week. At Method, they do them every Monday, and in fact, I took part of their philosophy. It's where I learned that on Mondays, you ask your employees about their weekend. And this is such a very simple idea, right? So you work with these people all the time, and I bet you all the people in the room here, all the people in the room here have had experiences where they've worked with someone in an office for years and they don't really know the person. They know what they do at work, but they have no idea that they even have kids. And just by adding one little tidbit on a Monday morning of what did you do opens up the envelope of who are these people? What do they do? How do they, you know, what makes them tick? What do they do for fun? What is their family life like? And it also makes it really obvious what the work-life balance is for that company. Because if all the answers are, I worked all weekend, which it would be for a lot of companies in town, well then you have a culture of we work 24/7, 365. And if most of the answers are, I went hiking and whatnot, especially if the bosses say, well, I went sailing and hiking and skiing and whatnot, well then you have a culture of we get out on the weekends and have some fun and relax. And you get to share, you know, personal notes when someone had a big wedding or birthday or whatnot in their family. It creates a family atmosphere versus a work-only atmosphere. Right? And it's, you know, 20 minutes. You do this in small groups. Don't do this as the whole company. All right, moving on. Method talks about inspiring advocates for their brand. So an advocate is someone who goes out of their way to talk about your company to others, right? Who don't work for your company, just to be clear. So they're looking for, they're looking for people who will be mad about what Method does. So here we are, it's the morning. You have probably seen 10 or 20 ads by now, maybe more. If you read the newspaper or read the news online, you've probably seen 100 ads. Can you name one? Can you name one ad that you've seen out of the dozens or hundreds that have passed your eyes already today? Right? No.
This Method, because you're advocating for it.
I'm advocating for it, but yeah, I just showed you some soap. I barely even told you what the product is. And so this again goes back to what Seth Godin said about Purple Cows, right? Ads don't work anymore. Right? I could ask you what ads did you see on TV last night, or what ads did you see on, wherever you were entertaining yourself last night. I have no memory of that either. Don't feel bad. So what they say is flip the pyramid around. So for most businesses, there's a few advocates, there's a bunch of interested people, and then almost everyone who's your customer just purchasing. And their marketing is about flipping that over and saying, no, let's just try and get all the advocates. The people who purchase are going to purchase anyway. But let's go and spend our time and our effort going after those advocates. And so that, again, that's half marketing, half culture here. Because what they want is to spread their culture across not just the company, but across their customer base as well, to actually make full stakeholders. To do this, they talk about it as not talking about the problem statement, but talking about the end state. Right, so this is, again, not business planning, this is marketing. So tell your customers, tell your advocates where they think they want to go, right, as opposed to what they're going to get out of, or why they need this in the first place, or what they're going to get out of it. But what is, if they use it, how's their life going to be better? Right? In Gaul, you can have a house that has cleaning products where all the chemicals that are in the cleaning products were all created by nature, not chemical factories. That's kind of their basis point, their basis of their business. And if you do this, like they've done, they get love mail. They actually get every day postcards and letters from fans. To just be clear, they make cleaning products. Right? They make hand soap, dish soap, laundry soap. And yet people like it so much that they write them letters. Right? That is something special. All right, third one, we're sitting here inside BGI. We're sitting here inside a school that teaches sustainability, so let's talk a little bit about green. Right. One thing that a lot of people who care about the environment get caught up on, or even societal problems and whatnot, is perfection. That, oh man, we can point to any of these green, clean companies. They did fine, but they didn't do it perfectly. Right? So Method has a whole chapter on this, and they basically say, look, the ideal way we could use the least amount of packaging in the world is that everyone brings back their containers to the stores and refills them. But they did some studies, and what they found was that most people forget to bring the containers back to the store. They're in the store, instead they buy a new container, and that uses up more packaging that they would like. So their solution in this case was, which you may have seen by now, these thin plastic refillable bags that have no design to them, no style to them. They have design, but no style. That refill 1.5 or 2.5 times the container that you bought in the first place. That uses 90% less plastic than selling somebody the container every time, but it still uses 10% more than if there was no plastic whatsoever.
They also doubled the amount of volume of the product when they shifted to the refill.
Yeah, so the refill is bigger. It's not refilling it once, it's refilling it 1.5 or 2.5 times.
I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I'm one of
Yeah.
those people who actually went out and bought them all and bought twice as much as I normally would because of that.
Yes. So anyway, the lesson here is not specific to refilling plastic containers. The lesson here is about anything that is trying to make the world a better place. Perfection really is not. Perfection really is the opposite of.
Perfect is the enemy of good.
Sorry, get that right. Perfect is the enemy of good. Perfection is not the goal. Right? You can set it as the final end state goal, but making progress along the way is just fine. Again, part of the culture of the company is getting people to consume less, right? Not getting them to consume zero. They take a lesson off of how you talk about this. So the original messaging around organic was to save the environment. It had nothing to do with human health, right? Or consumer's health. It had to do with health of the farmers and health of the environment. And it worked slightly, but it didn't work great. The messaging got switched around in the 2000s to say, eat organic because it's healthier for you. We're now seeing backlash on that says that might not be true, but the message worked better. And the lesson was, be selfish. Talk about things that will help your customer, right, and work your way out from there, right? And again, this book is a kind of a mishmash between culture and marketing, but same thing for your employees, right? Do what's best for your employees and tell them what's best, and explain and why you're doing this, why it helps them, right? And work your way out from there, as opposed to just saying, well, our culture is to make the world a better place, we're going to give 10% to charity, right? Well, where's the employees in that? Right? Where's the employee participation? Where's the employee benefit of giving money away to charity? Right? Be selfish about the employees, just like you're being selfish here about the customers.
But that seems to be a real problem with the nonprofits. That people are there to do good things and they work like crazy, but for some reason they're really the ones that get left out all the time.
Yeah, for lots of reasons, but it just starts again. Well, you have huge charities that do great in the world, and inside they're running the Dilbert office culture, right? And they don't have to. Method, in fact, when we talk about sharing profits, they don't share profits. So they feel like sharing their profits is not the purpose of their business. Right? They're not a charity, they're a business. They try and make the environment better by using the right chemicals, which are chemicals from plants. But they share their people because, in this case, a lot of nonprofits are lacking experience and lacking access to the high-end people that would work for Method. So they share those people, right? And they pay those people to go volunteer, but they don't share their profits. Method's a very clean company, we'll just skip past this, but they have lots of details about where they're impacting the environment. It's not just inside their product. Moving on, chapter 4, speed. So if we go back, we flip back, I think we're in lecture 8 now or 9. Flip back to the first one, the orientation. It's about speed, right? The only thing you have that bigger companies don't have is speed, right? It is your only advantage at this point. There's a book that they quote, they actually quote this in their book, which is, it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. Right? The companies that iterate and learn faster succeed bigger. Right? So get on that bandwagon and move as fast as you can, but they have a great lesson in here that says, but not too fast. So they themselves got from 2 guys and a car to a $100 million business in, I don't remember the number of years, 5 or 6 or 7 years. Right, $100 million business, big business. They were doing great. They were doing the hockey stick graph. And they decided, well, if we could do it in home care products, let's do it in car care products. And so they came up with a whole line of car care products. Different distributors, different customer base, different stores, right? Different everything. It's almost no overlap, except that they're chemicals to clean. And they said, well, if we can clean the house, we can clean the car. Well, they moved too fast. Sales were bad. Distribution was poor. And they eventually just closed it down. They moved too fast. And they learned from that lesson that there is, you want to go as fast as you can up to a point. If you want to go as fast as you should, not as fast as you can. They don't really explain how you know when you're going too fast.
That was my question.
Yeah.
And how do you sort of course correct around that? Because as you were telling that, I was thinking about speakers that we've had in our series who've told very similar stories, specifically Alter Eco, one of the leading fair trade.
Yeah, well,
food
I saw the
distributors.
same thing in the Honest Tea book. They
Yeah.
decided, hey,
Yeah.
we're a tea company, so we should do tea bags. And they wasted a lot of time and money doing tea bags. They couldn't make it any different than the other tea bags. In both of those cases, in the Method case and the Honest Tea case, they were growing fast enough that they overcame that failure by having more revenues from their main business. Right? So it's a potential business killer. I think in both these stories, there were always other projects on the side. There were always the second product line versus the main product line iterating too fast. I haven't yet seen the story of we iterated the main product too fast and customers had a backlash.
Oh.
I've seen that. We've seen stories of we've made too many changes and customers don't like it from Microsoft. Right? Pretty much every other release. We've seen stories, the prodigal child of Apple. We've certainly seen stories of them maybe not going too fast, but putting out products that no one likes. Right? We've got Apple TV sitting behind you. But there were a bunch of other products that they put out that no one really purchased. But for small startups, go as fast as you can.
Is there like a commonality between where the error was?
No.
Yes.
It's kind of it's a lesson of lean startup, right? You have to keep trying things. You have to keep pushing the envelope. I think the answer is do a good job of measuring so that you can cut off those experiments when they're failing sooner. Unless you're on a hockey stick curve and you actually have enough revenue to keep trying, because if you can iterate those things over and over again, you might find that it works. Right? So if Method was able to put their best people on the auto care products, hey, they might have been an auto care product company today. That might have been a bigger market for them than home care products. Don't know. But it was a secondary product, and like a lot of companies, I'll bet you they put their secondary people on it and just didn't give attention to it. And I've seen stories like that where the CEO gets sees this other product come along and likes it better than his mainline product, starts to spend too much time on it, and the main product starts dying off, right, for lack of attention because he's distracted by something else. It's a hard management problem. But it's good to notice that it is possible to move too fast. A lesson learned. In order for them to move quickly, and this is true of most manufacturing companies, they do not own anything that is a big, slow asset. So they don't own any factories. That's outsourced. Anything that would be sunk capital is outsourced. Right? Instead, they do all the design, and then they find vendors to make the bottles, to make the chemicals, to do together, put them in boxes, right? To print the boxes and so forth. Right? So a lot of the companies in here are service companies. It doesn't apply to that edge. But in order to move fast, you can't have any slow parts. Right? And again, going to the Honest Tea story, they couldn't find anyone who could make the tea they wanted, the way they wanted to make it, so they bought a factory. They didn't listen to this story. And in hindsight, at the end of the book, when he says, what would you have done differently? He said, I would never have bought the factory. Right? It was a big distraction. They wound up having to bring in other competitors into the factory because they couldn't use the capacity in there. Otherwise, they would have lost money. So it's interesting to read enough of these books to see patterns. Be first to market, right? And in their case, they're working with an indirect sales force. Right? We talked about sales forces last time. They're a retail product company, right? No one's buying, well, very few people are buying Method soap off the website. So they have to deal with this indirect sales force, which is the retail channel. And so they go way out of their effort. There's an entire chapter on how to make partners out of that channel, how to treat them like you're trying to make them succeed. And in one case here, they're talking about using their creativity to benefit those retail customers, giving out exclusives in order to help those customers bring in customers. We've seen this from Steve Jobs. Don't ask your customers what you want, anticipate what they need and give it to them. Right? That's the short version of that. And experiment a lot. So what you'll find in Method is they'll do new, I can't call them flavors, new scents. And they'll just simply call it a guest star, and they'll do a run that's big enough for one of their retail channels. And this is how you mix the two parts together. So you do an experiment, and you give it as an exclusive to, let's say, Target. Now Target's happy because they have an exclusive scent that no one else has, or a new product that no one else has seen. But it's really a test for you. So it's a win-win on both sides. Right? And if it works, then you distribute it to your own network. But they never stop testing these things. Right? Go back to that lesson of iterate, iterate, iterate. Right, so that's Method in a nutshell. And let's change complete topics. Now let's jump over to Netflix. So Netflix published a PowerPoint, or leaked, and I'm not sure it was supposed to be public. It's a 180 odd page PowerPoint on the freedom and responsibility culture. It's nothing like you've seen before unless you've read this before. So it starts with, culture's how a firm operates. And Netflix is in a very competitive space. Right? They had a giant breakthrough that said, hey, let's rent videos through the mail. That was an interesting innovation, which got copied by Blockbuster, which was the biggest chain of movie rentals, and Walmart, right, which is the biggest retailer, period. They beat both of them. So this is not a company to dismiss. And they beat both of them partially on this culture. All right, so you need a culture that, again, it's all about innovation. So a culture that supports innovation and execution. Right? And ultimately, Netflix is beyond that one breakthrough idea of innovating. Right? They've now moved on to streaming, which is also not a huge innovation. Right? But their execution is flawless. Right? Well, almost flawless. They had one branding issue. But their execution has been spectacular. In order to do that, they aim for the highest performing people possible, right? Which is what every company says. But Netflix does it in a different way. They think of it as a team, not a family, as in a sports team. So think about this for a second, which is, if you are managing a professional sports team, you don't hire the people that get along the best, which is how you normally hire people, or who's the right cultural fit here. You don't hire the people who have experience playing third base from a lot of other teams, but isn't the absolute best third baseman you can afford. Right? On a pro sports team, that's your measure of who you should hire. Right? You have a salary budget, either capped or not capped. So you have a budget. Do you want to hire the absolute best third baseman you can, and second baseman, and first baseman, outfielder? And it doesn't really matter if they get along or not. That's they will get along if the team is winning. As long as the team's winning, everybody's happy. Right? So the test that they use inside Netflix is who. So I'm the manager here. Who would I go out of my way to keep if they told me today they were leaving? And treat them like that now before they ask for them, before they tell me they're leaving. And if there's someone on my team that I would be totally upset at leaving, well, then go out of my way right now to make sure they're not going to leave. If there's anyone on the team who I wouldn't go out of my way for, then manage them out. Go get someone else. Right? So if that shortstop is not hitting, right? If that shortstop is doing error after error, get rid of him, trade him out. Right? If that person can't hit, they're in a slump, the slump's been a whole season long, get rid of them. Right? Go and find the best person and treat them that way the whole time. Right? Never seen this. I have been in corporate cultures where when I gave notice, magical things happened. I've seen that multiple times, at least in my career. And it was annoying, right? It's like, great, but why didn't you treat me that way 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 18 months ago when I was making plans to leave? Right? Why are you doing this now when I'm telling you that I'm leaving? Right? It's too late. Once someone, I've seen enough people who've turned around and done this to me. Right? As soon as someone says they're leaving, you don't want them anymore. You may viscerally think, well, I should try and save this. Let me try and give them a raise. Let me try and give them what they want. But their mind's already given up on it. They shouldn't be part of your company once they've given notice. Right? Their mind is elsewhere, so let them go. Right? Now, once you have these excessively high-powered people in your company, you need to treat them like they're high-powered, important people. Right? So you need to make a culture that is worthy of those people. There's a theory inside Netflix, and this is totally opposite of what we normally see. So there's a theory inside Netflix that we can increase, or they can increase freedom as they add more people. And what I've seen in every company that I've created, and every company I've ever talked to, is as you add people, you have to add process. And as you add process, people lose freedom. Right? So that would be the chart here. Right? More people, less freedom. You just think of the simpler one. The simplest one is vacations, right? So what's the vacation policy? What's the sick day policy? What's the policy on when I have to go see a doctor? Right? Is that a sick day, or am I just taking some personal time? Or what time can I show up in the morning? Right? How many hours am I expected to be in the office and whatnot? Right? All those things go down over time. As you get more people, you get more complexity. And as you get more complexity, a lot of those high-powered players just don't want to be in that environment. And so, you look at the giant companies out there, and yeah, they may have more total number of high-powered people in them, but the percentage is lower than a smaller company. Right? I remember, I really should have pushed back on this one ages ago, but I built a company back in 05, 06, and the first, I think it was the first 10 hires I made into the engineering group, into the software development group. My criteria was that every single one of them had to be the go-to person at whatever job they were at before. Right? That was in my interview process. Who in your group did people go to when the shit hit the fan? Right? Who did they go to when there was a bug that no one else could find? Who did they go to when they needed some help in designing something? And if the answer wasn't them, they didn't get hired. Now, imagine I have a group just like this, right? I got a group of 10, 12 individuals who all were used to being the go-to person. Well, clearly they're not all the go-to person anymore because I got 12 of them. It was quite interesting. I would get a request from a customer and I say, who would want to work on this? And 12 hands would go up. And 11 of them would get upset, 10 or 11 would get upset that I didn't pick them. And I got asked by my investors, basically, to fill out the team, right? Fill out as in, go hire the junior people to support them. Go hire the medium-ranked people who could be those people someday, right? And I really didn't push back hard enough to say, but why? Right? I get 8 times more productivity out of each one of these people than I will a junior person, or 10 or 20. Why would I want to hire someone for half their cost and get 1/8 the productivity out of it? But nonetheless, I actually hired someone to run the team, and they filled out the team. And what do you know? The percentage of high performance went down, and the total productivity of the entire group pretty much stayed even. It did not double or triple as we tripled the size. Right? So I've seen myself that hiring the best and brightest and highest end actually does produce a difference. All right, so how do you treat these people? Netflix vacation policy. They started off with N days a year, just like everyone else. Right? The new vacation policy, there is no policy. Right? So I actually copied this at my last software company. It worked great. Right? So just be clear, the policy is not take as much vacation time as you want. The policy is there is no policy. There's a process. The process is any employee should talk to their manager and say, I would like to take off on such and such a day or days. The manager can make sure that that's not an important day and then say yes. No one tracks how much time has been taken off by the employees. There is no chart, there is no expensing it, there's no tracking it whatsoever except mentally. Right? This has a bunch of, it seems weird to, I'm seeing our brows here, because everyone's worked to some place that said you have any number of days. Well, from the employee point of view, now you have a work-life balance of, well, I need to take some vacation time and I need to take it, I'd like to take it at this time, and my manager is a human being and says, great. You know, it's not conflicting with a ship date, it's not conflicting with a big conference. My whole team's not taking off that week. Right? So go, have fun, right? Relax, right? That's kind of the human element. You need to go relax. This could flip around. The manager could say, hey, you know what, you haven't taken a vacation in a long time. How about Friday? Take Friday off. The manager doesn't have to go up to his manager to get approval for that. Right? You can run the team to its best ability. Right? As a positive end for the company, there is no longer any liability for paid vacation days. So when the time comes to manage people out, fire people, well, you don't have to pay them for untaken vacation time, because there is no unpaid vacation time. There's nothing on the balance sheet, which you normally have to do at a bigger company, on liability for paid vacation days. So when the time comes, and it often does, to lay off some staff, and you decide that you're going to pay them for 6 or 8 weeks severance, everybody gets exactly the same thing. It's not 8 weeks severance plus the vacation days, whatever happens to be banked up. Right? There's no vacation banking. There's none of this gamesmanship saying, oh, I'm going to save up my vacation for 3 years and then take off a month. Right? It doesn't happen. It works really well.
Is there like a something policy where you get paid when you're, I mean, that seems like a policy to me. Just knowing if you take a day off, you're paid, or it's unpaid?
Yeah, you're paid. This is, one thing they don't make clear in this document is this the white collar Netflix workers, or are these the people who open the envelopes? Does it go all the way down there? Don't know, they haven't said. I haven't seen that written down. But let's just call it the white collar crowd. We know it works for the white collar crowd. You're paid a salary, you're paid an annual salary, right? And that's based on you doing the work that's asked of you of your manager. And just to be clear, again, flip back to 6 slides, you are the best possible person they could find for that job, right? And if you're not living up to that, you will be managed out, which means you're going to get a really nice severance package and asked to leave, right? And they never say exactly what nice is, but we'll call it 6 or 8 weeks. It could be more. Same thing goes on their expensing policy, right? Their expensing policy is 5 words long. It's actually wrote home, right? It's act in Netflix best interests. And what that means in practice is that if Netflix asks you to go somewhere, then yes, of course, your airline and your hotel is taken care of, right? That's expensive. But what they don't give you is a per diem, which I've seen in a lot of companies, saying, oh, you shouldn't spend more than $45 a day on food, right? And what happens when you give a per diem to a bunch of employees who don't travel all the time? well, they'll use the per diem, whatever happens to be. And they'll go a little bit extravagant. So what Netflix says is, look, if you're going to eat lunch at work and you're going to eat lunch in wherever, Peoria, eat the same lunch. Don't expense it to us if it's the same you would have spent back at home. Only expense stuff that's over and above. Like if you were in the airport, it costs more. Great, expense that. If you're taking someone out, right? If you are entertaining as a salesperson, that's reasonable. That's a reasonable expense, right? Use your judgment. Again, this is you're treating people like grown-ups. Expense them like grown-ups. It's kind of the same policy that founders of companies use, right? I'm only going to expense things that are truly expense to the company, and I'm not going to spend money that I wouldn't. I'm not going to spend money like it's other people's money. I'm going to spend it like it's mine. In terms of managing the workforce, managers are only supposed to set context. They're not supposed to micromanage. And a context is, all right, tell everyone in the company what the strategy is. Tell them what we're measuring on. Tell them what the important metrics are. What are all the assumptions and objectives, and let them go and execute. This we've also used in some of my companies. So we met at Ground Truth, we met as a management team once a quarter to set the objectives of the company for the quarter. And then once we had those set, each of our departments set our objectives for the quarter that matched the company's. And then when we left that meeting, we would go back to our departments and we would tell them what the objectives were for the company and for the department for the quarter. And then we met once a month to make sure that we were on track with those, make changes and whatnot. Everyone in the company knew the objectives for the quarter. Right? Everyone, all the way down to the person that got the phone. Right? Why would you not? Right? And in the startup, these things change a lot. So it was not like they stayed constant for the quarter. They often change mid-quarter. Again, in the Dilbert culture or the office culture, you just have that boss coming in saying, hey, we need to do X today. Right? Not we need to do X today because it matches this objective. Look, the objectives are, remember the objectives we talked about last week, right? Number one was let's go, close that giant deal over there, and this is related to that. And there was none of that. It's just let's go just do that. Right? And so when people make mistakes, and mistakes are often made, and we'll see this in the next one as well. As a manager, you're supposed to not start to doing the blame game thing. You're supposed to find out, well, what did you not give them in the context that led to the mistake? So in the WHYS exercise, if we were in Toyota, we were talking about the 5 WHYS exercise. Great. What did I not give them to succeed on this task, as opposed to, well, they screwed up. Right. I've not seen, even though this is the last slide here, I've not seen an update. I keep looking every once in a while to see what they've changed in here. But they're no doubt have iterated on this culture. Okay? And you can find this online yourself. All right, let's look at one more. And this one is way different. So Netflix is different. Valve is way different. All right, so I found this in their new employee handbook, which, just to be clear, was written by their employees, and there's a legend, I haven't got confirmation on this, that as an employee, you are asked, as a new employee, you're asked to go and change the employee handbook to add to it. It doesn't seem thick enough to do that, given they have 300 employees. But it's within the reason here. It's written in a very odd style, right? So preface, in this guidebook, it's a game company. So Valve makes, I always get this wrong, it's not Halo, they make, anybody know? Half-Life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Valve makes Half-Life, giant product. It's an Xbox game and a PC game and whatnot.
Yeah, they also have Steam, their distribution.
Yeah, so they have also built a platform for other game companies to build games on. They have a line of products. But they're a multi-$100 million company with, I think it's 300 employees now, 200 or 300. They're based in Seattle. And so the creator of this company came forward and said, I want to make the world's best game company. Right? And I'm going to do it my way, not the normal way. Right? So what he decided was it's going to be a flat organization. And what you've heard, you've no doubt heard this term before, and when we talk about, okay, well, Motorola is going to reorg to be a flat organization, or Microsoft is going to reorg to be a flat organization, what they generally mean is that instead of having 11 layers of hierarchy, we're going to have 5, right? That we're going to have managers that have 40 direct reports because it's flat, and all those managers are going to be equal to the other managers. But that's not what Valve meant. Valve meant that everyone is equal, that there are no managers, right? And so they've asked their employees to draw what that means in real life, right? So here is a flat org. Everybody's the same. Gabe apparently was the founder. And the joke one is everybody's the same, but we don't like chat, right? Or it's a network, or it's a blob, right? Whatever you want to diagram this out, just to be clear, there are no managers at Valve. You, when you're hired, do not work for anyone, you work for Valve. Right? That is flat. And just to be clear, it works. I know of no other company that does this outside of 2 or 3 people, but it works. So there's some issues when you have this structure. Like, what do I work on? Because no one's there to tell you what to work on. So you're hired. Their hiring process is different, right? There's a group of people get together and they say, we need more people. And they hire you. And you show up. And they hand you this book. And now you're on your own. Right? So what do I work on? Well, you work on anything you want. And anything, I mean anything. So you can go around and talk to people and find out what they're working on. They admit in this handbook that they're terrible about having a list of things that are being worked on because there's no one to do that. Right? No one has picked to make that list. They actually plead in the manual. If you have a way to do this, if you have a automated way to figure this out, please write it for us. We could use it, but the last version of this, no one had done that. So you go around, you talk to people, you find out what's of interest to you, and you join it.
What about the non-interesting, non-project stuff, like admin and, who does this, just keeping everything functioning?
Yeah.
Someone loves that and makes it a project, or?
Yes, or it gets outsourced. They don't say. But I assume accounting gets outsourced. I assume a lot of the back ends, just the HR stuff gets outsourced. Unless they have hired people who just love to do HR, which there are people.
Is there any way of finding that out? Because I was on the ferry here conceiving of something like this in my head and what it would look like.
Yeah.
And going back and forth in my head of having too many cooks in the kitchen or not having enough people to process the specific physical things that needed to be done.
Yeah.
This resonates with me, I just don't know.
We can find a connection to get some real answers. But I have yet to sit down with someone and ask how much of this is true.
Yeah.
I've heard stories of people who have met people who work here say, yeah, this is how it works.
And did they bootstrap this from 0 to
Yes.
60? And they never took investment, so they didn't have to.
I don't know whether they took investors or not, but it's been a highly successful company. And so one of the things you see, you read the stories about what Google does for their employees and what Facebook does for their employees and whatnot. Revenue solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah.
Right? Or huge amounts of investment solve a lot of these problems. But nonetheless, take from this, maybe not the whole thing, just take some lessons from this you think are useful. Okay. So first of all, I don't find it, I don't think I would make a company where I would hire people for anything that they felt like doing on day one. Right? Because there's usually a pressing need at the moment. Right? The reason I'm hiring someone is that I'm trying to get X done, and there's just not enough bodies on X to get it done by the time we want it out, so let's hire some more people to get it done. So it would be annoying to me to hire Bob over here and then have Bob go and do that project over there that's lower priority to me. I need someone to work on X. I'm going to find someone who really loves X. After that, that's fine. What comes next when that project is up and running, then maybe some of this is good. Right? But to start with, I have a priority. There's a reason I started the company. I want to get this done.
It seems like there might be a hybrid of that, where you take people that you just put in teams and you go, okay, this is your, this is where the objectives are, and you figure out what you're gonna do and how you're gonna do the responsibilities.
Yeah, so Facebook, you are brought into a specific team, and then you are in fact required to work on a different team after a year. You're not allowed to stay with your team forever. I think that was Facebook, I don't think that was Google. At both of those companies, you are free to move to another team. There's not much permission needed. They're very engineering-oriented companies. But this is, again, way on the edge, which is work on whatever you want, change whenever you feel like. So how do you do this? How do you physically do this? Well, every desk is on wheels. And you're encouraged to go work near the people who are on the same team as you. So unplug your desk, roll it over to your team, plug it in, and go back to work. Right. That's an actual diagram from the if there's a group that's trying to decide on something, like more hires or marketing or what trade shows should we do or whatnot, and you want to join in, well, of course you can join in, right? Because there's no one to tell you not to join in, right? There is no one. Just be clear. I got to repeat this over and over because it's so different. No one has a higher title than you. There's no seniority in this company, right? According to this manual. So if you want to join in on something, you join in. And if you don't, you don't. Which is, I've worked with enough engineers to know this is a very good culture for programmers. Because a lot of them say, I just don't want to do any meetings. I just want to get my work done. So they get their work done and they just don't go to meetings.
Where would corporate fiduciary duty come into the mix?
That would come at the level of the board.
So they're held liable.
Yes.
And what about the founder president? Because as we were going through this and we were talking
The
about that.
founder's only if he sits on the board. Yeah. There's no CEO. Right? There's a crowd of people, and the board is responsible for what they're doing. But apparently they have no mechanism for having to do what they want.
And do you know if the original founder is now president or
Yeah,
chairman of that board? Or
I don't know if he sits on the board at all. I know he's in this pool of people. He's still there. But he is not, unlike, let's say, the Linux crowd that works on the open source Linux project, where Linus, who's the founder of that, is kind of the king, or the emperor of that org. The founder of Valve is not. He's just another guy. He just wanted a great games company, and he's built one around this stuff. All right, so they're not organized into teams, in fact. They're organized into cabals. That's their term. And a cabal is just a bunch of people who want to work on something. There is one special position in every cabal, which is called project manager. I think that was the right term. That person has no more authority than anyone else. They just keep track of who's in the cabal. And they keep track of the list of what's being worked on. So they have the Scrum list, and they have the list of members, and that's it. So you go to, if Bob's the project manager, you go to Bob and you ask him, who should I talk to about doing such and such, and he should have that list. But Bob is just another member. So here's where the screw up comes in. What if you screw up? Because people make mistakes. So if you screw up, you're expected to make, especially around customers, make them happy again. Right? Undo the mistake, make them happy. That's it. That's about the only fireable offense in this company, is to make a mistake, have a customer find out about it, and not make it better. Right? What I have heard of this org is that they are terrible at firing, because there's no one to fire. There's no one to step forward and say you're fired. You have to make a cabal to do a firing committee to go figure out if this person's worth firing. So it's also not clear how much clicks show up in here and how much high school nonsense shows up in this org or not. But clearly not so much that whole waves of people get fired. Basically, it's just a hire. Once you're in, you're pretty much in this place. So what if you want to do something that's not being worked on? What if you have a great idea, like someone had the idea for Steam, which is this other platform? Well, if you have an idea, you talk to someone about it, right? If they like to do it and they want to do it together, you do it together. You tell other people about it as you're working on it, and other people might join in. And when it's ready, you ship it. And that last part's kind of interesting. When it's ready, you ship it. There is no roadmap for this company. There is no one with the authority to make a roadmap. There is no management saying, by hell or high water, we will ship the next version of this product before Christmas. Right? So, work weekends because we got to ship it by that date. No. They are working in a very lean, very agile organization that gets it done when it's done. And I'm sure they push each other to get it done on as fast as possible. But when it's done, they ship it. And when it's not done, they don't ship it. All right. In order to make this work, it's slightly different than Netflix. So Netflix is looking for that perfect shortstop. And I got a spot. It's, let's say, shipping manager for DVDs. I got to find someone who has great logistics knowledge. Right? Someone else who sets up the warehouses and whatnot. I need someone who, again, logistics knowledge, or negotiating with the movie company that needs someone with deep experience inside the movie industry. At Valve, they look for T-shaped people. T-shaped people are generalists with one area that they have pretty good expertise on. And so it looks like this. So you want to find someone who can do a little design work, and do a little coding, and do a little marketing, but maybe is like an expert on databases or an expert on websites or something. And the next person, I can't design at all, but I can do these three things, and I'm a great coder. Right? And so you look for a lot of generalists because you need generalists in a crowd of generalists. Right? You gotta find people who can work in this kind of org. You have to find people who are self-motivated. Right? And just like that, A people hire A people, you got to find people who are even better at this org than you are to make this org work. As soon as you start letting in people who need management, you're done. Right? This org can't go any further. So the hiring bar is really high. What they do say is, I think it's on the next one, if you can read that, not everyone fits in this organization. So the lesson of this, I think the lesson of this outlier is to show that whatever corporate culture you make will not fit everybody who could potentially work for your company. So I'm sure there's some great hires for Netflix, but for whatever reason, there's something in that Netflix freedom that would not work for the employees, and so that wouldn't work for them. In this case, I'm sure there are people who care about their titles and care about how they move up through organizations and want to be a manager, and lots of other reasons why they just can't work here. It just wouldn't work for them at all. And so they list a bunch of things that this org and their structure just doesn't do well. There's no mentorship here. I think it's on this page. They just don't do a good job of explaining what's going on in the org. And the same is true of those totally hierarchical orgs. Right? There's a lot of people working at Valve who could never work in a hierarchy. Right? And yet someone decided or just let it happen to create the hierarchy.
How do you think they brought people on board in the early stages?
Oh, I think that's easy. It's a programming house. You just say, I would like great programmers, and you tell them there's no manager, people flocking. The question is, how do you keep it going after 100 people?
And everybody's on equity, or they're just generating revenue of what they build?
It's either profit sharing or stock grants or equity or something along those lines. Yeah, company's working just fine. Right? By all measures, that company's working just fine. I don't know whether could you take that same structure and apply it to, let's say, Method Soap, and have Method Soap still work. Don't know. Never seen another flat org that flat.
Yeah.
Right? Could you take the Netflix model and put it on Valve and have it still work? Maybe. There's lots of other high-power companies out there in a hierarchy. So my takeaway from all this is, give it some thought. That's what I keep saying whenever I do this. Is give it some thought. Don't just let it happen in your company. Which parts of these do you think are parts you like, and take those parts. You don't have to take any model full on. And sit down and write it out. Here's how do one page. Here's what I want to do in my company. Here are the policies I should have when we get to 10 or 20 and 30 people. Right? And maybe make it into the thing you hand each new employee. Here's the culture of my company or our company. Here's the culture of our company. Maybe it's part of your recruiting process. Right? It's hard to get people to come into new companies. So right? More you can hand them that says, look, we're different. Right? More you can make your employees advocates, right? You shouldn't hire any employee that's not an advocate. Right? So things you can do to make them excited about joining in, like, hey, I can take vacation whenever I want. Or hey, this is not going to be a place where there's any forms to fill out to do anything you need. You just ask your manager. Right? Or maybe it's I'm the manager and everyone else is flat. Right? A hybrid structure. Okay? I'll leave you with that. Thanks.